we live in a world that's being destroyed for one. The biggest polluter in the world. You have these major industrials. At the same time, these are the patrons of the arts. So there's already a conflict in the art world between making any kind of critical remark about class, really critical, like sticking it to them.
Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Rachid Bouhamidi. How did you start getting interested in art, like the LA scene? Because you're pretty...
I mean, first came actually making stuff, because before being a part of an art world or art scene or any of that, those are kind of, a little bit, they're not my primary life is the real world, has to do with like what I do in at home painting and in my studio. But I've been doing this my whole life. My mom tells me that I was drawing à le moment que je suis tenir un crayon dans la main. The moment I learned to hold a pencil in my hand, I was drawing. So that I was probably drawing around the time I learned to walk. So I've been doing some kind of thing, and people ask me, oh yeah, like date when you decided you'd become an artist, and I'm like, well, when I was 14, I saw Goya's prints, and I knew I didn't want to be a comic book artist exactly as I imagined I would be when I was 12 anymore. I wanted to be something like artist, like what he was. And what he was, as I was growing old, had something to do with who de Kooning was, even though they weren't the same. But like,
in what sense?
In the sense that it was high art. It was on another level, Like it wasn't just I'm going to work in a comic book store or company making, and my idea of it, I mean, I was fascinated, when I was like 12, I was like blown away by Todd McFarlane and Michelangelo, those were like the models of draftsmanship.
For me, it was Jim Lee.
And Jim Lee, and Jim Lee. I mean, those guys were my heroes when I was a little kid, and I would go to the fucking Comic-Con, And
really? When it was still when
it was still comic books. We were looking for comic books. I was a collector. I mean, with no money, like a very small budget. I was looking for all the cool comics, bringing my portfolio with me to be perused by these people. I wouldn't even fucking spend 2 seconds.
Oh my God, I'm so curious about.
Yeah,
what
I don't know that I.
Like.
It's interesting is that I never I think there was a guy. What was his name? Rob
Liefeld, yeah.
Liefeld, right. Okay, I'm glad you know this.
Yeah.
And he, I probably, I mean, his drawing now to my eyes would be like, ugh, But like at the time we had to, we contended with the fact that he had some power in our schema of like what art was, and because he was not only considered very, very good draftsman, a good drawer, he was also very successful, and his opinion mattered to a lot of people, and obviously we always looked for, after we draw, it's like a really nerdy kind of art practice where we're hanging out in our rooms drawing, and like we need some validation from like the big dogs,
So what did they say?
I'm talking 12, 13,
What did Rob Liefeld have to say?
I didn't go to him, actually.
Okay.
As it turned out, I brought drawings with me. I remember, I mean, that was the secondary thing for me, was going to have I knew I was fucking good at it, and I modeled myself after them, and I could draw as well as them.
Oh, really?
In their language.
Do you still have these somewhere?
I have some, yeah. And I looked at them, I'm like, yeah, this is as good as that shit.
Yeah.
But it was very, very tightly modeled after who they. It
was like emulation.
Doing. And there's one thing to be able to draw like them, and I had only ever done when I was a little kid, like one comic book, like actual narrative, a sequential narrative. And that was really gnarly. I was a really violent, crazy. It was like, about like, this Manichaean struggle between the Nazis and the bad guys and the good guys.
This was before Columbine, so no one was worried about you.
It was before fucking what's that movie, Inglourious Bastards.
Oh, okay.
It was like that. It was violent, and it was like the same story.
Okay.
I was obsessed with that because my grandfather was he was a veteran of the First World War. I mean, he was born in the 1890s.
Your grandfather?
My actual that's just my father, the father of my mother.
Okay.
And he was in the resistance, the French resistance, as a 50-year-old.
There was a resistance in the
Second World War.
Okay.
No, I
just wanted to clarify.
In terms of his, no.
But sometimes I don't know stuff.
No, that's fine. No. I mean, because no. After the and during the First World War, a lot of people sign up immediately, not just because not exactly because of just some corny patriotic fervor. The Germans did advance into France, and the French were like, no, fuck that. Yeah. And that's like kind of, my grandfather was from Bordeaux, and he joined up in 1914, and he was in that shit for 4 years. He was in trench warfare, and then he became a war pilot, like a pioneering war pilot. Anyways, I was always fascinated by my grandfather's story, like where he came from, and the fact that he was, in the resistance in World War II. After he was like retired, he joined up, and he was caught by the Gestapo, and they sent him to the concentration camp. So he spent 2 years in some of the worst concentration camps in Germany. He had been to.
He went to more than one?
Yeah. He survived a death march, like from one to the other. I mean, they marched him. Basically, prisoners of war weren't processed through the extermination, channels, I guess. They were treated differently in that way, but they weren't treated much better than the really, really, really brutal conditions in which so many people died of disease and starvation and all this shit, and just but my grandfather was liberated from Belsen, which is where Anne Frank died.
Where's Belsen?
Bergen-Belsen is in southern Germany. I think so. I've never been there myself. I've never been to the site. It had been demolished, but that's where he was liberated from in April of 1945. But all that stuff kind of fueled my imagination as a kid, because I obsessed over it when I was over just like, I'd ask my parents a million questions about France and our family history, and when I was a little kid growing up in the San Fernando Valley. So that was, something that generated a lot of ideas for me, especially in my interest in comic books. So I created these muscular kind of like characters, but that were rooted in World War II, So I've been drawing and doing things like that my whole life. But when I went to 95, I went with one of my best friends and his dad. His dad was taking figure drawing classes at the community college near where I lived in Palm Desert, and we ended up going on a field trip to Pomona with we were invited, to go with the professor and him, and that was an eye opener for me to see, go. So part of the thing is that I didn't really spend very many. I lived for a time in LA. And then when I was 13, I moved to the desert. So the really important formative years, I didn't have really that much art, good art. My first contact with serious art,
What year?
That was my cousin, my uncle's house, actually.
How old were you when that happened? And actually, I think you're pretty well. I mean, we were at at Patrick Donovan's talk, and that's when I realized that you're a painter, right?
Yeah, of course. Okay. Yeah.
So then that's how you identify.
Yeah.
What can you teach me about contemporary painting in general? Because you have a pretty deep knowledge of that stuff. Yeah. And it's interesting that you started off as a comic book guy, because I also did. Yeah. But
I mean, now in the contemporary moment, as far as painting and drawing and this, there is no these kind of divisions that existed. There are like a few things that have changed so much that they'll never be what they were. One of them are the divisions between high, middle brow, or low art. So because of really. And that is a contentious issue in itself, like what even constituted that in the first place, like what comic book art was, with people like extraordinary characters like R. Crumb is not considered any less of an artist than, he's not even considered less of an artist than some of the old masters are. He's that good at drawing. But it doesn't matter as much the form of art that he drew. I think that
where's this dialogue taking place though?
This is taking place in the contemporary art world. That there aren't these kind of divisions anymore between what is considered low and high art. As much. I mean, there are things for practical reasons that remain what they were. Like painting is still like, for various reasons that I'm only supposing exactly. I couldn't say that this was I couldn't verify that this is necessarily so. But like painting remains like the staple of the art world. Like there's something easier about it. That's as an object to be sold and traded and moved around. But I mean, I took to it because I can talk about from a personal place, and there's also a lot in art that's changed. The contemporary moment, I think Jerry Saltz talks about this a lot as a famous art critic in New York, that there is no real like modernism imploded or was destroyed. The sense that there was this kind of almost linear trajectory in which there was progress being made in art. That is kind of 50 years ago had kind of been challenged, and the narrative or whatever had been challenged, and now we're in a moment where there's so much kinds of things that are coming from so many different places that is all like kind of legitimate, but yet it's just so much as such a huge deluge of it, and it's coming from all places all at once. And this is something I heard. This almost verbatim. Jerry Saltz. He says that there's no place for art criticism in that context. So like it basically doesn't exist. Not in the sense that it did when Tom Hess and Harold wrote. Like all the traditional, or even Robert Hughes. Who had a very kind of. I would say a criteria that was kind of in criticism that would seem to be unfair or I don't know. I like to read those guys because they had a fucking place. They had even if it was kind of polemical or something, they had a lens from which, or something from which to analyze something, and they had an opinion, of what they were seeing based on a criteria they had. And now a lot of what you see in art writing is generally it's like less critical or something, it's either, I don't know, I don't read that much. I not as much as certain people. I love Peter Sheldall, who was a New Yorker, who was a poet and an art critic for the New Yorker for years and years and years. And he came to my studio once. So I had a personal connection with him because he came to my painting studio at Boston University when I was in grad school. And I didn't have that many paintings. Usually I make 1 million paintings right away. I'm pretty always been prolific. But I didn't have very much because it was like the first or second week of grad school for me, and I didn't really know him then. This was 15 years ago, and we just started talking like crazy about Masaccio and metaphysical painting and Morandi, and we're really into it, because I'm into it. I'm literally, painting in that world, in that state of mind, and in that
metaphysical painting.
Yeah,
what
can
you define that?
Well, I mean, it's a kind of painting that asks questions about itself, like, what is this of? What is this? And metaphysics, as you know, is the pre it's they're principles on which something is founded on. A pictorial language, they're the basic first principles, on which
I just more familiar in the popular usage.
The popular music.
So explain that again. So it's not the same. It's not having to do with spirituality.
It has to do with a kind of like the groundwork on which, when you talk about it in painting terms, when you say that something is metaphysical in painting, it has to do with looking at the basic principles on which a picture is constructed, and some of their some of the that was what I'm looking like some of the conclusions you draw from looking at a work or constructing a piece. What's interesting in artists that we're talking about is that, they have constructed a world on a two-dimensional plane, right? That it's an illusion, but it's also a physical material thing, and there are all these kind of things that you look at and you can start to notice. Morandi is a 20th century painter with a very, very, very deep understanding of composition and these kind of questions, or these kinds of things that are interesting in painting. He was a master of those things, and he did it in the most humble means. A lot of people kind of dismiss, without a very good eye for painting, will dismiss it as kind of clumsy and kind of rudimentary, because they're so humble. And the images, he painted boxes and bottles and common everyday objects as still lifes, and little landscape paintings of very simple scenes, very simple. But he could construct a picture in such a way as to make you think, like, well, if this is this a painting of a painting? Is this a painting of nature? Is this a painting? It makes you ask questions in that sense. It's deep. Like it distills everything down to like very, very powerful and important relationships. So that relationships of form and color and those things are, like, I have the feeling that they never age. They never, like, because you can look at Masaccio and you can look at these paintings. Masaccio was a painter that died when he was 27 in fucking the early 1400s, and he's the one that reinvented linear perspective. He's the guy that first used linear perspective independently of the Roman times, the ancient, and since antiquity, they had a knowledge of that.
What was the date again?
The early 1400s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he died at 1428.
Yeah. I mean, he's the. Who's the person that did the first perspective painting? Like the one that's acknowledged? Because I used to live out there.
Oh yeah, well that
Masaccio?
Masaccio. There was Masaccio, Brunelleschi, and Donatello. Were the Brunelleschi was an architect that I think was the first to devise linear. It's a very simple concept. You have a point, a vanishing line, and orthogonal lines that verge towards the point. And you can chart everything according to a one-eyed, perspective.
Well, one of the things that's really cool about that I didn't realize, it's related to, I have a book up here called Perspective for the Artist, which is a title that I really like.
Perspective for the Artist, yeah.
But it's a book about perspective, and one of the things that I never realized after years and years of studying it until I read that book is that, like, it's basically you putting a piece of glass in front of you and you're drawing it. Yeah, that's like essentially what the illusion is, right?
Right.
And so that I think comes from the camera obscura and that kind of that like not photographic cameras, but like it was even a revolution in that sense, in terms of being able to understand, because even if it's an obscura and you're projecting it on the wall, it's the same thing as having a thing. Right. So if you have that tool and you can trace
that thing that's removed from the experience, it's just another. It's a tool that allows you to see something in a new way.
Yeah, it changes your perspective.
It changes your perspective, right? Yeah. And we talk about Masaccio not just in those terms, but because his paintings are very real, like this idea of verisimilitude in art, the idea of painting the real, how do you paint something to look fucking real? Yeah. And he did this thing where he uses the flatness to a form that's like half form and a full form. And he has this rhythm. You see this rhythm and it's like, this is fucking rad. There are interesting narratives that he creates out of the formal elements of his painting. That's tight, man. Yeah. I mean, if you can do that well, you're onto something, because like shitty painters, I don't know what I mean, but like people that aren't as advanced don't know how to construct a story based on the formal elements, like, because there's so many things and they're unsaid too. It's kind of like you look at like a Masaccio. There's a painting, I can't think of, from the Brancacci Chapel or something. You look at the painting, and there's some curious thing, like, it's almost like set up a certain way. It's how you set it up, It's like if you look at this scene of a window, scene with these figures surrounded by buildings, and there's a window that's open up. If you accept this notion that this is a window that opens into the house, this other window opens into the fucking pictorial world, behind it is, and those are really deep things for them, like peeling back reality to reveal the celestial or the other world. And there were fantastic. There are a lot of examples of this fixation on like piercing through reality. Before the Matrix or whatever.
Can we go back to? I have a couple questions.
Of course.
About the. So going back to the thing about Jerry Saltz, because we're going, like, we're talking now about painting that I'm familiar with.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
I'm more curious about the stuff that is I guess the first question leading into the broader question is like, is that materializing? Is the Jerry Saltz philosophy of no hierarchies, is that materializing? Is there low brow at the Whitney? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like it's almost like low brow has been co-opted by some big artists. Okay. And then the form in which something that was presented and you can see this in like, maybe Raven Pettibone is just the idea of drawing, like drawing, just plain old drawing. Yeah. As
what a novel idea.
It's not that it's novel.
No, I'm kidding.
It's just that it like, one of the things that I think Pettibone's exhibitions of drawings did was that it was like, I don't have to make big old oil paintings or something like, or sculptures or whatever. Like the drawing is enough, like a bunch of fucking tacked on drawings, and they're fantastic, all of them, Yeah. And maybe even an assemblage in an inventive way. There's some interesting ways in which he actually curate that the drawings are curated, how they're displayed, and that's enough, that. I use comic books as a kind of example of a vernacular art style that had been around for a long time, and then there are artists like Philip Guston who, who's a badass, like unlike so few people like him in the past 160 years in America. He's one of my heroes, but I love that, that Guston blasted through the last part of his career before he died with these kind of clunky, really, really intelligent, like I said, Masaccio, and Morandi, these really intelligent, tight compositions, but they're made of cartoonish, fucked up looking figures. The clan, the hooded, the hoods, the 2x4s, all his whole vocabulary, as they like to say, the vocabulary of his imagery, of just set of different things that he was interested in, but really, really, like, it looked like it came out of like some really underground comics or kind of forgotten little comic strips, something like that. Like, I don't know the exact. I know he was interested in a lot of things and you can see parallels at the time. This is in the late '60s when he was. And he's a force to be reckoned with now. So many people are piggybacking on the career of Philip Glass. I mean, in a way, he inspires me. He's like a giant, on whose shoulders to stand on. Right now, I mean, I'm standing on his shoulders. Yeah.
No, I got you. But then, okay, so then I guess like what is interesting to me is when you talk about Masaccio, are you using contemporary language to describe something? Would he have described himself like that, or has the vocabulary of painting not really, or not the vocabulary, but the conceptual conceits and all of that? Like, as far as conceptual painting, the most I'm aware of, like, because of my like BFA education, is kind of like the Frank Stella, Clement Greenberg beef.
Yeah.
Is there other examples of conceptual painting, or is formalism has it just kind of, after the Clement Berg thing, has it just kind of died out?
I don't know that it's died out. I mean, I bring up Masaccio. There's a lot of things that developed, and a lot of things that developed in Western painting since Masaccio, and I just bring him up as an example of somebody that was.
But the way that you talk about his formalism and the depth of it, like, and how and the tightness of it, would he
transcends time, I think.
Yeah, but were those his concerns, or was he approaching it from a maybe more like, was he? Do you think he was thinking about these things?
He was. Yeah, of course, he certainly was thinking about. He was aware of the revolutionary character of the thing. He was. I think obviously lived in the 1400s, so there wasn't. I never read The Lives of the Artists by Vasari. I know some of the stories. That he was like, his character's personality is recorded in a book written in the 1500s. Some things about him, who he was. I mean, his name was Masaccio means clumsy Thomas. His real name was Tommaso. Clumsy because he was like a fucking wreck, kind of. But he was an incredible artist.
But I guess hold on. I guess my point is that like the context in which he was painting was very different. Like, it was for the church, and now it's just a complete marketplace.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to make any categorical or sweeping remarks too much about what motivates the creation of art. Certainly, the marketplace has affected it. It was still
a marketplace, but it was like, because it was Masaccio. I mean, in that time period, it was pretty much all religious painting.
Religious painting. Religious painting. Religious painting, and it was patronized by the church. And I don't know. At that point in time, there was some kind of it's completely different political economy. We're not talking about capitalism. This is.
But the nature of my question is has painting, has the like art. So the way that you like, what has happened in contemporary painting that is outside of something that was like has stood the test of time. Right, like for example, who's another example of conceptual painting? Because I mean, I understand the formal side of things.
Conceptual painting. The only conceptual painting that interests me is a painting that has strong formal and other things going on. Like Kerry James Marshall is deeply, and I met him. He came to my studio, he praised and then he ripped me apart, you know. He's somebody who is very, very keen on the conceptual and rhetorical meaning of the things in his paintings, the elements of his paintings, like the color black for him. There's a whole conceptual framework around the idea of black, you know, and there's a dialogue in art history. Just as an example, Ad Reinhardt, right, is one of the precursors of minimalism, considered to be. You know, he was a very polemical, like really, he wanted to save painting. He didn't want it to be fucked with. You know, he wanted people, like, if they didn't understand abstract art, they can kiss his. He even made cartoons about it. You know, about how. To defending abstraction, to defending abstract painting. But Ed Reinhardt, towards the end of his life, was slowly going into an area of like absolutes, you know, just absolutes. He was like an absolute guy, you know. Like, how can I take this thing and reach the pinnacle of what it means to get. You know, the people are concerned with those things. Like, he was painting monochrome paintings. He started painting which colors, but red, blue, different colors. And what he was doing is he was painting a slightly different hue and tonality of the same color, so that it's almost all one color, except you can see a slight recess, and it's almost like a spiritual thing, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think a lot of these guys like Rothko, they're like anarchist, communist, atheists, but they're, you know, also deeply spiritual people too at the same time. What Rothko was doing, with Ad Reinhardt, was he was trying to paint the last, you know, paintings you can make. And for him, black would signify the end. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It signified, so he was painting these black paintings, like, imagine, with just a slight variation in tone, so that you can see a difference, a spatial situation between the different blacks in the painting. They're like different kinds of blacks. And Kerry James Marshall, an African American artist, thought. I think, you know, for him, that was an interesting premise. Like, is that the last, or is this where we start? We start with, like, black is not the absence of light. You know, the absence of light. It's the sum of all colors. So, and of course, he has a reason. So I really like that. He's not just, and it's not all just dorky shit like he's making it up. It really matters to him that for a long time the black body has been not appreciated, has been invisible in the sense of Ralph Ellison, you know, has been for so many years. So how do you address the idea, even just in the representation in art, for the fact that for a long time, I mean, this is like a serious redress or whatever, like approach to this issue. But, like, how do you create something that has a conceptual weight, like, that addresses the idea of racial discrimination, this racial gap, you know. So black in his paintings, this color of the skin of the people in his paintings, he purposely made them darker than most people are, because he wanted you to be aware that they were. That's who they were. That's how they were identified. That's how they're labeled. All these layers. So it's fascinating to see conceptual layers, you know, within a painting that has a very strong formal integrity.
Do you have any examples of conceptual painting that you're not interested in, like that doesn't? Because I mean, when you say,
it seems to me that it all just depends on what you have to say. If you have something to say, and it still remains the same. Like Jackson Pollock complained about this too. If you don't have anything to say, then don't say it in painting or anything else.
But my question is there a way of doing because painting is so inherently formal? Is there a way of doing non-formal conceptual conceits? Would that be like?
Well, yeah,
that would be like the Frank Stella stuff, where the the objectness of the painting becomes part of it.
Yeah, I mean, he's a formalist.
Yeah.
But his thing is this kind of reckoning with certain trends in formal modernist ideas about space and what you do in constructing a picture. For him, it's like this is not a pathway to something else. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
It's literally what you see is what you see. That's what he said.
But has anyone been able to argue that effectively, or did he kill that argument at the time?
It's hard.
Has anything developed since Stella
of course,
on that dialogue?
Because
I'm like, you're just teaching me right
perceptual, now. I mean, Robert Irwin it has to do with perception, and it has to do with a lot of things that that generation of artists were obsessed with. That generation of like the last like true blue whatever modernists, and Robert Irwin is a fantastic artist that has a very profound conceptual and also formal like trajectory, like how he ended up doing things that look like really conceptual, like you don't even like it's like an empty fucking room, and you walk in there and you're like, oh, Wittgenstein or something like that.
But is that painting still at that point?
No, not at all. That's like an absolute. That's like saying that there's necessarily one thread throughout art history that leads you to say that Robert Irwin making gardens now is the logical consequence of perceptual painting. That was his trajectory. That's what's important to know. Every artist that makes art has their own trajectory. They have their own impulses and bodies of work that lead to other bodies of work. And how you, I mean, and even how you frame that and you talk about that in terms of art history, or you go to terms of contemporary arts thing is open, but it's important to know that, like, that dialogue, is different for every artist. That's what's important to know. I know a lot of people that I went to a school in Chicago, Art Institute of Chicago with. I have friends that were absolutely stuck in their heads about what Clement Greenberg had to say about fucking color fields or something like that. It's like, who gives a shit?
What did he have to say about color fields? That they were bad?
No. That he just categorized things and he separated them. Oh well, there's gestural abstraction. I mean, he's a lot smarter than that too, and he deserves a lot of credit. It's just that he's just not. It's like he's not the fucking Pope. This is not religion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, but some people. You're saying some people took it like that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The whole like at one point it could be said that there was a very kind of almost a unified art history. Sorry,
we are not just having a conversation. You're talking into a mic. Please talk.
I'm so sorry. I'm not used to it. I
can adjust it for you a little bit.
It's okay. I hope it.
No, it's fine. It's just
thing up.
No, it's fine. It's just like. You're like just be careful.
Okay, I'll be as careful as I can. You maybe gesture with your hand when I'm getting too far. You have been. I have been. You have been. All right, so I'm trying to get close to this mic.
The thing is that the louder I have to make this, the more I hear that. So the closer you are to the mic, the better.
Right. Yeah, perfect.
All right, so
now.
Sorry, I derailed you.
It's all right.
But the topic is interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting.
And I'm also not very well versed, like, because how would you? So like, basically, painting is everything now.
No. There's a lot. Painting is popular. It's just like it's. There's a lot going on. I mean, there's AI art. I don't even know what it is. Or there's NIFs, non-fuckable whatever they're called.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can't have sex with NFTs.
I'm just kidding. I mean, there's all this garbage, and there's a lot of that stuff that has nothing to do with art that has somehow made its way into the art consciousness of some people. But going back to what I was going to say, what I was saying before I had a microphone issue was there was a time when it seemed like Clement Greenberg seemed to be his dictums on art were considered absolute and to some extent. And I brought up Philip Guston. Well, Philip Guston kind of has always had a bone to pick with the idea of this sense of art becoming purer and insoluble. You know what I mean? Like he was always like no way. Even when he was an abstract painter, I mean, he came from being a fucking prodigious figurative painter in the 30s. Modeled himself, basically taught himself how to draw. Taught him, he had nothing, he had a little room with a light bulb in his, and I mean, he taught himself to draw. He had some mentorship, he learned how to draw, studying the Mannerists. And people recognized his amazing gifts really early on, and he had to go through, he did a complete 180, throughout his career, his life, turning when abstraction became a big thing in the 40s and 50s. He had moved away in a kind of way that made sense for him. I mean, I imagine there was some pressure to conform, or maybe to some extent, I probably was. Like, if everybody around your clique was kind of dropping a certain idea of figuration and painting one way or other in their own way. I mean, people really sought out new ways of painting, and he did too. And he's somebody who was painting, and that was led by this process, from painting to painting into a zone, a new space, where it was. But he had always stayed true to the idea, like, that basically, painting is fundamentally an impure thing. So, like, the idea by the time
I like this guy. I'm gonna dive deep into this.
It's funny. But so, like, at a certain point, like, you had all this kind of derivative paintings, people that were remarkable because they started off from one place. And Mark Rothko was I think he was a terrific figurative painter. Clifford Still was a figurative painter. And they developed their own shit. They developed abstract expressionism, or whatever you want to call it. And de Kooning never really got his... He was so good at drawing and painting reality, that it had always stayed there, no matter how abstract his work ever got. And he was so independent, that it didn't matter that his paintings were a little bit different from, like, Barnett Newman, who wasn't a great draftsman, was after other things. They were after everybody was after their own thing, and they pursued it. But the problem is that some of the critics and there's this kind of had codified what they were doing into simple principles, like of formal principles,
like a code of Hammurabi about painting.
Yeah, kind of. It became like that. It became a straight fucking jacket, dogma, and it became like a straight jacket. And in terms of, like, tastes, that were really, like, you can imagine. I mean, it was a long time ago now. It was over 50 years ago that Guston kind of came on the scene with his hooded, his KKK guys, his cartoon character paintings, and this was 1970. He's the famous Marlboro show that came out, and everybody fucking hated it. They couldn't believe this shit. Like, it was just like because it, like, kind of is ugly, I think they're gorgeous, but they're like, he didn't try to make it pretty at all. It made it fucking hard again, really hard to like just, it wasn't just some blasé shit. It was like somebody reckoning with his own mortality, with the world he lived in, with the political condition, the situation, the fucking human condition, was in that guy. He felt it really, and he had for forever. So he gave up this idea of, like, that he should be, like, spending his time worrying about whether an orange went well with a green, he wanted to paint about shit, the violence in the world, and he just fucking and there's some amazingly inspiring artists out there, like it's even in the past 50 years, it just came out on the scene and just blasted through, I think like Richard Serra was he's not doing very well, I don't think, in his health. No, he's become like, canonically important artist, but like, I think the idea, some of the things that he did, like, especially early, the sculptures of, where it seemed fucking radical, like just they were inserting themselves right into our sensibilities, a certain way that felt like, maybe, like tilted art, was like this wall that just cut through the courtyard, the square of the courtyard, and you couldn't walk across. It's because he built this artwork that just totally fucked with your senses,
Is there anyone contemporary right now that's making stuff right now that gets you this excited, that has that kind of balls? And
I don't know. Fuck, I don't know. There are artists that I admire a lot. Trent Doyle Hancock is a genius.
What does he do?
He does everything. He does painting, drawing. He created I admire him a lot on a level like, on the highest level for me, because he's somebody that has this brilliant ideas, that are based on based on what he started. Like, he's a lot like me in a way, like, only the difference is that I abandoned things. He like developed every aspect of the things that he was interested in. Mm-hmm. And, he was raised in the Baptist church. I think it's a Baptist church, really religious family. And he created his own narrative, a Manichaean story between good and evil beings. And he developed that called Vegans and the Mounds. Mm-hmm. And it's brilliant, and he developed that, and still developing, still rooted in the same ideas, There isn't this kind of separation that happens often when you turn course in your life, like I admire it so much. And he's done, his paintings, his drawings, his prints, he's done performance and ballet. He has his own ballet. He did his own ballet. Wow. It's fucking, he's an incredible artist. He's somebody that inspires me a lot, and he's a very nice guy too. So I've been able to interact with him in person, and his wife also is Tremaine Ji-Young Choi. She's an amazing artist too. Other artists, I don't know, a lot of good artists. I mean, Henry Taylor inspires me, because he's kind of like me too. Mm-hmm. I'm a direct painter. Like the guy has ideas about fucking the world he lives in, and he nails it. And he like makes work about that. And he also just like, if you're sitting there, he wants to paint you, he paints you. Yeah. He's like still interacting with his, and that's what I have this very. I think we have similar proclivities, like the impulse to work and paint, and also to and this connection we have with that we can't even name exactly why we want to paint somebody's portrait. We just it's something about us, that I
mean, I've been to parties where you're painting people or you're drawing
people. Yeah. I just because I do, like, I don't really put it away. I don't really stash away my art making, For me it matters a lot to me that because it's fun too. It's like, how many people like, well, to have drawing parties, that's cool. I mean, me and some of my friends do that, but like if you go to some other party, you don't see people like hanging out and like, like doing that at like she like.
I'm gonna start a live stream, so I'll probably have you back on and we can draw.
Okay, that would be cool. Yeah, I'd be down to do that.
But okay, so then like, what is it too difficult to question? I mean, you maybe already answered it with the Jerry Saltz thing, but like, what is popular in painting right now? Like, what is what is
popular? Yeah, no, I didn't answer it with the Jerry Saltz thing. Well, there are a few tendencies. I think figurative painting has come up in a big way. Mm-hmm. Representational painting. There's a curatorial focus on artists that have from communities that have been kind of sidelined through art history. It's kind of generic, so I don't really like say that this is exactly so, but there's an emphasis now, an interest in the works of people that were kind of marginalized for ages. Some of them so African and maybe African American, Latino, queer communities, and artists that are from these things, that people are interested in what is in that, and there's a question as to whether that's necessarily, that doesn't say to me whether, and even figuration is really popular now. You see a lot of figure painting. I see a lot of really bad figure painting. Yeah. I don't know who made them, but like I see a lot of, for me, what I think is kind of amateurish shit. But it's kind of cool. I'll look at any old painting, because I just have an eye for that kind of thing. But there's an interest in a really big interest in representational art again, and narrative painting and
how much
like that.
How much is the because you've when you talk about it, obviously, like if you don't have an interesting life to draw from, right? Like how much is the individual experience, like, because now we're talking about this giving opportunities to people, right? So we're having more opportunities. Yeah. But in when you've been talking about all the other painters, you've also talked specifically about who they were as people to some extent, right?
Yeah.
How much do you feel like that matters in the painting?
That's a good question.
Do you are there any painters that you appreciate that you know nothing about?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think about. It's hard to say for some artists. Like, I happen to love Bill Traylor's work, but it's impossible to separate the fact that the guy was born into slavery, didn't know how to read or write, and he was drawing on the street corners of Alabama in his 80s when they found his curious drawings. His drawings are wow. They you have a direct contact between his vision and yourself through these drawings that he does, and they touch you. They're like, wow, this is fucking interesting. But at the same time, it's very difficult knowing that where they're from, or my father, like drew a bunch. He had no training in art. He's from Morocco, and was kind of starting to draw these fantastical things that it's hard to separate like who they were as individuals. I don't think you have to be from any special group or anything like that to be an artist at all.
No. Yeah.
Sometimes what adds to what makes it somehow those people, it seems to me, without being able to say this as an absolute, I'm saying some artists were were left to incubate for a long time without anybody's interest. Nobody paying any damn attention to you. Yeah. So they were making their work in isolation. What's called outsider art. Jerry Saltz hates the term.
It's a weird term. Yeah.
It's a weird term because, like, what do he doesn't think it exists. But there is something to be said for those people that have spent I mean, if you have the impulse and you have the fucking fire, whatever you want to call it, to paint and to draw and to describe something going on in your personal world or outside of you, in whatever it may be, then that that is kind of transcends socioeconomic, political, racial, all that stuff. If you have that impulse, that's what really matters. But it is interesting that to look at the context and what's like the material context, and like, does this guy have a lot of money, or did he have no means and made his shit out of found art object? Thornton Dial was an amazing artist who was grew up in utter poverty in the deep South, and was making things that were just way out there, and just out of painting that was also object based, and that completely at this pivotal point of intersection between certain things in art, like the 2D and the 3D, the sculpture, painting, and all these. And he was doing this stuff without even any direct dialogue with them. He was doing this for the most part, most of his life, independently of any discourse in art. That's fucking interesting. Yeah, that's it's.
So, but then I guess what I'm hearing is that right now in the contemporary world, it's almost like leaning more on the personal stories of people, not or let me rephrase that, because that sounds like I'm saying it's affirmative action. I'm just saying there's no conceptual conceit that is of interest to the community. It's more,
there is.
Okay, that's more
there
what
definitely is. Yeah, sorry.
No. I mean, but that you did answer my question. I'm just trying to get more into the answer, more deep into it.
Right. Yeah, of course.
So, what would be conceptual conceits that you think are really not trendy? Because again, I don't
know. Yeah, I know what you mean. There are a lot. I mean, people bring their own agenda to what they want to do in their art. People want to talk about immigration. They want to talk about. There's so many things that people want to address in their work. Everybody has.
But is there a zeitgeist
a zeitgeist? There's a zeitgeist. We live in a really fucking dangerous time. So I don't know if we live in a time where we live in a world that's being destroyed for one. We live in a where the biggest polluter in the world. You have these major industrials. At the same time, these are the patrons of the arts. So there's already a conflict in the art world between making any kind of critical remark about class, really critical, sticking it to them, and environmental degradation and things like. There are a lot of the zeitgeist. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things I see a lot of interest in bringing up vernacular cultures that have been marginalized. Like, for instance, I
when
said,
you say
Latino,
vernacular,
what I mean is there's
styles?
let's say Chicano art.
Okay.
That the museums, the Whitney Museum of Art wasn't really paying very much attention, or had this kind of bemused, kind of stance towards works being made within this kind of a cultural vernacular, graffiti art or something like that. Now that's come to the fore as some kind of important thing that people are taking seriously.
For a while
and
now,
spending a lot of fucking money on art, to buy in that is painting that. I notice in painting practice, like a lot of people are using airbrush and spray cans and things like that. Stuff I don't know. I'm fascinated in that context. I'm like, I don't know if I could make that, because for one, painting has to do with touch.
Yeah.
So if I don't touch the canvas, I have a problem, because it is about touch, and like all the zillion paint strokes I ever put down, had to do with some aspect of the physicality of touching of the canvas, So the idea of like a spray can, it's almost taboo, or but
they're hard to fucking use too.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never tried, So I'm interested in that. I mean, I can name a number of artists that are really great that do some fucking amazing shit. Artists that are trained also in other commercial art, like sign painters. I mean, I can name names, but I don't know if it'll be.
Would you say that what? It seems to me like people have such an internalized sense of postmodernism in culture at this point, that they're maybe running away from that a little bit and trying to become more dogmatic and whatnot. Yeah. Do you find that to be the case? Like, do you find modernism popping its face within a new context?
I suppose so. I mean, my painting might
fall into that category.
It might, I guess. I mean,
and that goes back to the discussion
it
about it.
matters to me that I don't live in that painting was not invented in a void. You know, every aspect of painting has this historical. If you dismiss the historicity or whatever you want to call it of the technology of painting and the advances made from one, because there was an advance. There were things that happened from place to place. There were exceptional artists that emerged from different places in history to different parts of exceptional. I mean, like Rembrandt never even fucking left 40 miles away from where he was born.
Yeah.
And it was the greatest painter ever lived. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's like pretty much that one.
People will have an argument. Will have a hard time. No, people will have a harder time
deciding whether it's Titian, Roger van der Veen, or some dead white, European painter. No, but what's important is that there is a history that Picasso didn't come out of a fucking void. Neither did Ingres. And neither did any Courbet or Balthus. I mean, I grew up when I was a kid. Balthus was alive, and that guy was for me in my imagination. A lot of it is kind of my when I was learning to paint, like really starting to paint with oil paints and from life and. Balthus emerged into my life. I'll say he like Jesus, although not like Jesus, but he's a painter, for instance, that I was studying a lot and getting to see his work in person in Chicago when I was a teenager, 18, 19, and who was still alive. So his presence in my mind was like a connection, a direct contact with Bonnard, Matisse, Picasso, and beyond. Obviously his painting was, he was criticized for never really wanting to become a modern painter and stuck to his guns about it his whole long life. And I even went to his house. I went to Switzerland to find him, and he was inside. He died 2 weeks later. He was in his house.
You probably brought some germs that killed him.
No, yeah, right. I know. Oh man, that was
so. Then, if I'm gonna keep paraphrasing just to make sure that I'm understanding and that you can add to it. So, so what I'm hearing is that how do you feel like postmodernism even fits into the art dialogue anymore? Is it as important? Do people care?
Yeah, it's important to challenge because it's as important as it is to know some of the things that led to it. That's a part of the analytical aspect of it, of even postmodern. John Berger.
Do you consume your own work through the lens of postmodernism, even though you're making modernist work?
I don't really necessarily filter it through any of that discourse, exactly. But I know I'm influenced by and I consider my work in formal terms, there's certain the modernist elements, and I do like, one of the things that I think like art that has to do with the world. I mean, Goya was one of the first modernists. He's considered by modernists to be the first, and one of the things that made him so radical was he was looking at the world and painting about the exact, journalistically, it was painting of the 3rd of May, the execution of peasants at a peasant uprising. He was chronicling the events around him with his art, and that's fucking terrific. That's what we should, as artists, have the balls to go after what's going on. I mean, I'm sorry to use that term.
No,
that's
you're
pretty
fine.
bad. But I mean,
the guts. Women have balls too.
Okay, good. Yeah. Chesticles. This is going really bad.
All right. We can stop talking about genitals.
Okay, all right.
Unless you want to talk about painting them.
No, but there's kind of I guess my painting it's easy. It's like David Hockney would say, well, he was a living artist. He was saying, You know, you can paint landscapes, you can paint still lifes, you can paint portraits. What else is there? It's kind of like some of us painters just like, we have a rich imagination, but it's kind of still like within confined to.
Well, it's a discipline to
because
some
it's
degree.
a discipline. Yeah.
So it's hard to, and especially, I mean, it's interesting, like what else could be done with painting. It seems like at this point it's just there's nothing new that can be done, or is that crazy?
Interesting,
and that's why people are still painting.
But you still, that's an important point. I mean, you paint not because you have to be. I mean, painting is as old as humanity, right?
Yeah.
So don't wonder why. I mean, you also shouldn't wonder why there's so many painters. There's so many fucking people on the planet, and we are we're makers. We make things, you know. So it's not only it's a direct consequence. It's a direct connection between the numbers of people. But I think that obviously, you know, you should be guided. I would say I would make the judgment that you should be guided by your own impulse to work rather than to find, because you're gonna find something new. I mean, there's nothing more fucking like individual than a painting, you know. It's like your handprint, your hand, your nervous system, you know, how that works. That shows different in every painting. You have to be sensitive enough to look. So paint ugly, nasty paintings, you know, and beautiful paintings or whatever. But like, I would encourage people to really, you know, use their hand. Don't try to make art too much. Just make a painting of something, and then let that show. Don't look for a style. Just let your hand be your style. You know, that would be you. That's what shows. You know. So and not to be overwhelmed by the no feeling. It can be, because we're always looking for new things, you know, new openings. Like, well, this has been done, but it hasn't been done to the extent that I can maybe push this, or maybe it has. Because there is just so much work there, and it's been going on for 40,000 years or whatever. You know, it's like a long. That's what there's a quotation from that I read. I went to the Underground Museum to see Noah Davis's paintings, a bunch of them, because I'd only seen a few, and he died, you know, very, very sadly died of cancer when he was, I think it was only 34 or something, 33. I'm
Jesus, that's so young.
Yeah, so young. But he did some amazing things in that short life. He founded the Underground Museum, and I saw his work, and there was a quotation that really moved me, you know, and he said that people feel uncomfortable about the spirituality in art, but painting is so old that it belongs in the realm of the spirits. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, that's a kind of, like, what do you mean? I'm like, in the fucking realm of the spirits. It's like on another level. It's somewhere deep in our psyche, or deep in our spirit.
It's a process of making a reality too, to some degree, right? And there's narrative involved, which is kind of interesting as well. So it is as old as the oral tradition kind of thing. You know,
it's like how
it's older than
how long
writing.
Have we been telling stories? You know, it's like, I want to write the great story. I mean, we've been telling stories, but you have to keep telling their stories. You know, and hopefully you're telling stories that are specific. So specificity is the thing that's more important than style and making art. Well, I don't even fucking care about art. I mean, I just paint, you know, and I want to say something about an experience that I have with something. And then that's what you have to do. And hopefully the composition works, the painting makes sense, and it's compelling. You know, it has to stay compelling, and it has to stay about, as much as possible, about your own experience with the world, you know. And so as long as we keep painting about our own life, about our world, you know, that's what's important. You know,
so there's vulnerability in there too. Then
there is vulnerability
because you're sharing yourself.
Yeah, because it's like, you know, your hand. You know, to some extent. I mean, you know, it depends on vulnerability. I guess in that sense, depends on how much you let yourself feel vulnerable. Well, vulnerability is a good is an aspect that's relevant. And if you look at Rembrandt's self-portraits, they're just like this really, really afraid of death, or just there's an emotional content there in those paintings. And you sense the vulnerability of the person, who lost all of his money, all of his kids, all of his wives, and all that shit. He lost everything, and all he's got is the ability to paint. He doesn't have very many years left or very much time, and he's in this vulnerable state, But there's vulnerability, yeah. I mean, there was once even my friend of mine proposed the idea of a show about the vulnerable, but it's maybe a little bit not exactly...
Too on the nose.
Too on the nose. It's a little bit. Some things are better left unsaid somehow, or not.
It would be like.
How do you
a show named Painting?
We're vulnerable. No.
So. One of the things that I really like about like the Renaissance period also is that, back then distances were much larger. Right, like getting from one place to another was
until like 100 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
The Renaissance, you mean like?
But you think of like Italy and just like getting from Italy to Germany to Amsterdam, and it seems especially
the
now.
Romantics were like, "Wow, I'm going to Switzerland."
But I'm saying like what I really appreciate is that the lonelier they got during during the Renaissance, like the colder the climate, like as the farther north you go, the more time they had to be miserable. Like I went to Florence. Florence is fucking miserable during the winter. It's like raining every single day.
Oh, really?
I was like, my feet were always wet and shit like that. But like it was amazing art, like a lot of contemplative stuff, And one of the things that I love specifically about Florence is that it didn't have its own military. It was like kind of left alone
as a city-state.
As a city-state by the Roman city-state and the what's it called? And Milan. Siena was their rival, and they were a banking center, and they also didn't have an army.
And they also lost most of their fucking people during the Black. I've been there twice.
Have you been to the
Palio?
The what's it? Oh, the Palio. Have you seen the Palio?
I was stuck outside the Palio, but I got to be a part of the
That's where
20 years ago.
That's where the first that city is where the first 1 point perspective drawing, like true 1 point perspective that it's in one of the churches, and one of those churches has like a horse in the Palio. So like all the different all the different
contradas. That's it.
But those traditions there are so crazy, and they're so like quaint and antiquated. And then
I mean they had prized like the civic life, like and painted paintings that were secular civic life of their city-state,
and sexy paintings too.
Oh yeah, they had it all. I mean, fucking the Sienese knew that the Earth was round before Columbus ever sailed the seas. Whatever.
Wait, is Siena where the one that has Saint Sebastian as their patron saint? Or is that another city? There's a city
Saint Sebastian.
There's a city that got ravaged by the plague, and their Saint Sebastian. Saint Sebastian was their patron saint, and then their portrait of him has more arrows in it than anywhere. Because they fucking hate him.
Mantua or something. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know about that. I know Saint Mark is his patron saint, but his name is all over the Venice, and.
So you spend a lot of time in Italy just because of the painting?
No. I don't go there that often. I haven't been there in a while. I've been there 3 times.
Nice.
I went to like an artist residency program, kind of a school. It was more like a school because I was able to transfer credits and finish up my BFA from Art Institute of Chicago quicker. So I got like a whole semester's worth of units.
Nice.
But I saved a lot of money too, right? Because that's what I was really concerned about. But I was able to go to Italy at the International School of Painting, Drawing, and Sculpture in Umbria.
Nice. So Umbria is nice,
Umbria,
man.
Yeah. So I stayed in this like castle village called Monte Castello di Vivio.
Wow.
And this was in 2005. And we spent about a month and a half there painting and drawing and every day, every single day, and sculpting every single day, and it was great. We had terrific teachers. My teachers from SAIC, Art Institute of Chicago, who got me to sign up for it. We're teaching there. There's Dan Gustin and Don Southard and people I had met there for the first time. Amazing painters, Martha Armstrong, Ying Li. They're like they're like inspiring artists. Like that they're not household names, but they're real, true painters. And we had a really great it was a great little program. And then I got to venture off a little bit. I've been there. I know France better than France is my country. I'm a dual citizen of France. I speak the language. But Italy is still. And like one of my favorite paintings was a German artist, Grunwald, and I went to see the Eisenheim altarpiece, and it's just a fucking revelation, what he did, even just pictorial tension, the idea of a tense dynamic in the painting. There was like nobody, and this wrenching, painful, like incredibly poignant paintings, of Jesus on the cross and all these scenes from the Bible and stuff. I mean, they're incredible. They still are. They're 500 years old, but they're way beyond the imagination of any sci-fi nerd or whatever, or something like that.
You heard that, sci-fi nerds? Shots fired.
I don't mean it.
Says a guy that used to write comic
books.
Go
see the Eisenheim altarpiece. I know it's so out there. It's like God.
All right, man. Okay. Anything else that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to maybe say about painting?
Can plug in the fact that I have a painting show coming up.
Yeah. I mean, I meant before we do the plugs.
Right.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you about painting that you like want a point about painting that you have in your back pocket that you think about a lot? That maybe
in my back pocket, like ready in my not
or something
not exactly,
that you contemplate.
That I'm always thinking about how to make a good picture, and also how it's difficult. Like I find it's there are so many conditions that come up in painting. Like you set up yourself so that you're speaking a certain language within this painting, and you feel like it's difficult to break out of it and talk about other things or do other things. So I feel that my painting, and I have a gallery in Morocco that really likes my work, and people here that I show my work all over the country, mainly in LA. But I do get asked like what my painting is about, and it's different. It goes from like kind of more like almost kind of pattern like decorative painting sometimes to like paintings of strippers, and because I think my subject matter is a whole human experience.
Yeah,
it's gotta be that open. It's gotta be about the homeless people out there in the street, and it has also gotta be about something else, I have to be able to do whatever I have to do,
But you're not painting people out on the street, or are you?
I have, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But
I just haven't seen the paintings.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of paintings. But I mean, it may be a fault of mine that I have, that I don't stick to any one thing, and it seems like that things start to unify. As soon as they unify, they break apart. And it's just like this drama of being an artist, I guess,
Well, okay. Anything we can plug for you now?
Oh yeah,
you have the show on August 2nd.
I have a lot going on. Like I've just been painting a ton. Most of the year I did a couple of art fairs this year, but I have a show opening on August 2nd at Giovanni's Room. It's a gallery downtown on Broadway. Some really nice large paintings. That's opening on the 2nd. It's going to be up for a month, 2nd of August. And I have an interesting, probably a drawing show as well. We haven't established a date for that. And then later in October, that's kind of a ways away. I have a solo show as well in St. Louis.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and Catherine Bernhardt, a friend of mine, who has very famous artist who has a gallery space out there. So she's giving me a solo show. So there's a lot coming up. My work's going to be around a lot in the next 2 or 3 months within that time. Yeah.
And then you are your Instagram and your website?
Oh, my Instagram is just my first and last name with a dot in between.
Can you say
it's Rachid.Bouhamidi, RACHID dot Bouhamidi, BOUHAMIDI.
I thought you were just gonna say .Bouhamidi and then move on.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And then cool, man. And then no website or website.
Oh, I'm working on a website. I'm in between websites. I had one for years, and I made it myself, and I didn't really like it. But I'm doing a website. And I'll have. I paint on canvas. I also build tea house structures. I do a lot of different things that involve painting, but also involve construction and
tea house structures.
Yes, that? Those are some of my cherished things. I build once a year. I've built 5. I built little houses, like a little tiny house that maybe about 6 or 7 people can hang out in. And they involve, my interest in some architectural designs and also just painting things that I've been interested in. It's like I do it once a year, but I haven't, for lack of space, I haven't, and other circumstances, I haven't since 2020.
Cool.
But we're gonna have when the website comes up, it'll be, pretty comprehensive. It'll have a little bit of everything I do.
Cool, man. And we'll be back next week with another guest with another topic that may or may not be art related. Today we talked a lot about painting, and I learned a lot. So thank you.
Okay, well, you're welcome. Thank you. I'm glad I was, good for that.
All right. See you guys next week.